Okay, so last class we did a little debugger work on the address book table conversion, and we're going to go through a little more debugger stuff. So I am going to bring up debugger, which is under application development object management. Right here, debug application. And so the table conversion that I'm doing is R55AB0T, and that was previously loaded, so it defaults in there until I hit the trash can and get rid of it. Now, a common error that developers will do is if it's already in here, they assume they're ready to debug. And that's not necessarily true. What you should do is you should highlight it and then click on the rebuild DIA. And what that does is it refreshes everything, and you can sit here and open up all the event rules that have all the events that have rules in them. And for us, since it's a table conversion, it's only the row is fetched. And so there are four major windows in the debugger. There is the object browse window, which allows you to load up applications, UBEs, and table conversions. And once you've loaded up the whatever device whatever object you're interested in, you will pretty much close that. Now, the other three windows are the application window, which shows you the objects that you've compiled and are ready to be debugged. There's the break points window, which I normally have down here, and it allows you to monitor the breakpoints. And a breakpoint is a place where in your code that you want the system to stop and tell you something. So I can put breakpoints in a whole bunch of different places and say, I want you to stop there every time we're going through this. And I want to then look at my variables window so I can look at where the code is. And it's kind of like looking at the memory. Now, it would be best to describe this in terms of variables first. Is there are, depending upon what object you have and what event you are in, also will indicate what variables you have available for you to look at. As an example, ER variables are those variables that you created when you were in your table conversion, and you go up here to variables. And if you see there's 6 variables here, which happens to coincide directly with the 6 variables here in ER variables. Additionally, there's, for table conversions, there's input column variables, and those would correlate directly with if we go to the table conversion and we look at what our input is address book master. And an easier way to look at it would be through Universal Table Browser. I'm going to pull it up here. And we had address book master, which is F0101. And so all of these fields indicated across the top of this are all the fields that are going to show up in the debugger as input columns here. Now, here they list them out to you in alphabetical order of the data dictionary item. Okay. So you can scroll through and find all of the input variables, all of the input columns. And those are basically looking at each of these fields for a particular record. Now the output columns, I'm going to minimize the input column thing here. The output columns directly correlate with the individual fields that we have defined in the, in the output column, the select outputs. If you remember, there is a single table record, and inside there, we have defined 4 fields called number, name, search type, and notes. And if I go back to the output columns here, you can see there's search type, number, name, and notes. And then there's the text line, which is the whole thing together. So we're going to take a look at these values. I'm going to go ahead and run this so we can get an idea of what some of the output is. Now I'm going to open up batch versions. And that was R55AB0T. And I am just going to override the location, and I'm going to submit and run it locally. And it's going to start kicking off here. And then if it hits a breakpoint in my debugger will either come into focus, which it just did there, and it will pause, and it'll pause where I put a break, and it'll allow me to see all the values that I specified, like the number is 12285, which was actually the address book number of the object I was working, of the record I was working with. And then we have the name and the standard, the other field, what was it? The notes, where we made up the last name. So since I haven't actually created a record yet, down here at the bottom, if we remember, is where we're inserting the text line 1. And as soon as we hit that line and execute it, then this output column Rodney D.textLine will then populate. Now, unfortunately for us, it will probably then go to the next record and clear that out. So we might never see that. So I am going to, I'm holding my finger on the F10 key, just as a reminder. The F10 key allows me to step over fields, over the event rule and execute it. Now there's also a step into where if I have a machine code debugger, I can actually step in and look at the machine code. But for now, pretty much all you're going to use is the F10. So I'm going to hit F10 and it's going to step through all of these event rule events. And notice it's going to keep populating these variables that I'm following the status of. And if I want to go faster, I can always go to debug and say go, and it'll just, which is the F5 button, and it'll just keep going until it hits another breakpoint. Since I put a breakpoint down here, I'm going to go ahead and finish this while loop by pressing the F5. And notice that it gets down to here and it's completely finished that while loop. And if I check it, oh, I put it in the work alpha. And now I'm getting the subscreen. So I'm going to hit F10. And that's where it grabs everything up till the comma. And then now I am going to click the F10 button here over the insert row. I'm going to see if this populates down here. And hopefully we don't lose it, but I'm guessing we will. Boom. Oh, good. And so this is the one-line representation of the last row we worked, that text line. There's the number, the name, the notes, and do we have search? Oh, the E is the search type. So it puts it all in one big format there for me. So now those are the ER variables, the input columns, output columns. We also have a couple of other system values and system variables that we can look at. And at first glance, these system values don't really look too promising. The only one that really makes sense, and they're also SLs, which means they're system literals. So if I look at SL date today, it's going to tell me what the system thinks the date today is, which it's very confused there. It's a bunch of special characters. And maybe I can figure out who I'm logged in as by looking at user ID. I'll look at that one as well. And that's indeed what I'm logged in as. And I can also look at the version. Well, we happen to know that the version is BB0001, but I'm going to look at the system literal as well. Now, the system literals never change, so they're not too helpful to us right now. So I'm going to delete them. So I'm going to highlight and I can right mouse click and hit delete. And each one of those deleted. But it did show me an interesting thing that when I right mouse click, it says I can modify that variable. And what's really nice is if I click on modify variable, it's like, oh, the current value is E. I'm gonna, for some reason, I may want to change that value to something else because my logic, I suppose I have some logic that's really not working and I want to force some logic to happen. It might be of value to change that. And I'll give you an example here. I'm going to hit F5 and get down to right before the loop here. And if I'm going through this, you'll see I'm grabbing these letters. And suppose I want to change the value of the, I'm going to hit F10 a couple more. And I'm going to say, I want that character AH0001 to trigger now as the comma. And so I'm going to find this variable. If, let's see, if character AH0001 is comma. So I'm going to turn this into a comma and make, I've now changed it to a comma. So it's going to drop out of this end while loop early. Now it's going to go up here to the test and then it's going to jump down here. And you can see that I faked it out that the comma was right after the U and it populated that value. Now, I don't really have a good reason for why I did it here, but a lot of times, like when I'm in an endless loop, I might force it to jump out of the endless loop and things like that. Or I might force it, I might have data. For example, I might have data that says if employee was terminated and age is under the age of 16, that I was going to go do some special logic. And I can't find any data that actually is a terminated employee that's under 16, then I can force it in order to test that logic that I'm working with so that I can test that logic. So back to these system literals though. The other thing is the system variables. Now these are variables that tell me a little bit about what's happening with the system. And the two really good ones are the SVIO status when I do some table IO and I do a fetch next, it will tell me if it does or doesn't find a record. And we'll talk about that. Form mode can tell me if my form is in add mode or change mode or inquiry mode and things like that. Those are with applications. So there is some value in these system variables, just not for you at this time. So those are the variables. Now, what other things can we look at? We can we can disable breakpoints. If we want to see how this one just became a circle, if I were to hit the F5 button, which is the go button, it'll skip right past and only go to this breakpoint next because I've temporarily disabled it. I can also re-enable it and it'll stop there. I can also look at the properties of that breakpoint. And this is where things get kind of interesting. I can tell it I can input a condition that it breaks only under certain conditions. Like I want it to break only when the search type is not equal to employee or something, or if an address book number equals a certain address book number that I'm looking in the data, because I know that something is happening wrong with a certain record and I want to figure out why. I can have a breakpoint that stops only when I get to the right record that I'm having the problem with, things like that. This is actually very rare, the setting breakpoint conditions. I think I only know of one other developer who has ever actually used the breakpoint conditions. So it's very rare. So when we have the chance to learn these, you're going to be better. You're going to know more than most of the developers out there. So I will work on setting up some good examples for you there. Let's see what other options. All of these are, like insert breakpoint is the same thing as just clicking right here and right in front of each line. I can insert and remove a breakpoint. I can delete all the breakpoints at once. Let me put a couple breakpoints back in. I can disconnect from the application, which means you've had problems and you need to be able to close down and you can't do it. That's a big problem. So that is most of the valuable information regarding the debugger. I'm going to go ahead and hit go here. And I'm going to disable this breakpoint. So in fact, because I want to just have this finish running, I'm going to disable all the breakpoints and just have it go until it's done. Any questions about debugger? I'm guessing you'll want some more tangible examples of what you can actually do. Any comments regarding debugger?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Presently.
So it is finished running. Do you guys, let's see. There's my Rodney D. I'm going to go open it up and take a look at it. Okay, so there's the output. Don't need to look at it anymore. So that's debuggers. You guys good with debugger? I am going to go ahead and anything else we can do with this table conversion that you can think of? Okay, I'm going to do one more thing, and instead of notes, I'm going to look at the data real quick. I'm going to see if I can grab a phone number. And 12285. I'm going to, I know the table FO115 is phone numbers. I'm going to see if some of these have a phone number. 12285 by putting in address number and doing a find and see if we get anything. We don't. And I don't want to go searching all around. So I'm going to see if any of these guys have a phone number in address book. So just follow, you don't have to follow what I'm doing here. If you have questions regarding the code that I'm putting in, please stop and ask. But I am going to do some table IO. I am going to select on the FO115 the phone record. And I'm going to say, I want you to search the phone record for the address number of the employee that I'm working with, which is AH. And I want you to come up with a result set. And I'm going to fetch that particular phone number from that same table, F0115, find, next. And I'm going to grab just the phone number. And I need a variable to put it on in, so I need to get a variable. So I'm going to cancel out of there for a second and create a variable called PH1. That's phone number. And I saw that because this is PH1 right here. This is the data dictionary item minus the prefix. So I am going to just grab phone number. I've created a simple one. And I'm going to go back and add my fetch next. And I'm just going to grab one record, F0115. And I am going to take the record that I retrieve and put it in phone number. Finish. So here I've selected phone numbers for that address book number and put it in a variable called phone number. And now I'm going to add it to the notes line by saying OC notes. I'm going to concatenate it into what we have. I'm going to say OC notes equals the concatenation of what I already have in OC notes. I don't want to lose that. So I'm going to call it again. And then I'm going to pass in that variable phone number and say, okay, now this is kind of a dirty way to do it. And then I am going to run it again and see what happens. So I'm going to save it and save it. Go to batch versions and I'm going to run it. There it goes, it's running. And oh, by the way, I could actually put in a breakpoint here and it's going to stop eventually at this. But I never recompiled it after I changed the new code. So it's going to think things are weird. So I'm just going to turn that breakpoint off and tell it to continue running. And it finished running. So I'm going to go look at export. Actually, I already have it open. No, I don't. I closed it again. So I'm going to look at right mouse click, open with Notepad. There we go. And so you see some of these names now have phone numbers to the right of them. And so I've grabbed the phone number for this. So that's one way to do it. Now, the problem is we don't know everything about that phone number. So it's very incomplete right now. Because we don't know if that's a direct line, office, fax number. We don't know what the area code is. And they're using a bunch of different formats. Some are 7 digits with a dash. Some are, looks like they've got 7 digits with a space. Whole bunch of different formats here, which makes it a little tougher to figure out how to deal with it. So does what I did make sense to you guys? That I'm grabbing the phone number.
I think so.
Okay. Would you guys like to implement that? Shall we go ahead and do that? So go ahead and go into OMW in your project. And go into your R55AB0T and go into design. And so just kind of shout out I'm going to go ahead and turn recording off because this is all unless you want me to record it. This is gonna be a lot of boring stuff. So sitting here waiting